the record button going. Oh, I'm gonna stretch. Oh, doctor says I need a backiotomy. Ouch. So any questions? Let me chat thing here. Any questions? I'll just start off that way. Boys changed my ringtone to the Mandalorian theme. I haven't actually had my phone ringer turned on ever. Like maybe a couple times waiting for something specific, but as a general rule, my mailbox is never set up ever. I'll never answer my phone. But now that the Mandalorian theme plays, now I'm definitely not answering my phone because I just want to listen to that. That didn't solve any problems. It just like, it happened the other day and my dad was calling in and I was like, oh, it's important that I talk to my dad. But I was like, dun, 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 dun. And then I was just like posing around my house and thinking about Baby Yoda. All of a sudden, no more dad. He's not there anymore. But so I called him back. Anyway, we are continuing the chapter on race. Okay, so although, and there's a discussion for this, and it's like weird to plan out a semester when you're, you know, when there's so many moving pieces and none of them are just us in a classroom doing that thing. So I planned out this whole thing ahead of time and would much rather switch out the Jane Elliott discussion right now with the other piece. Might do that. So heads up on that. Even though people have already posted for the other one, I might switch the due dates around because we'll be watching the Jane Elliott thing Wednesday in class. So if you're watching this after the fact, it is very important that you're here. If you are watching this like so on YouTube later, I will make an announcement Wednesday. If there was one day as a teacher that I could teach or show one thing, it would be Eye of the Storm, the Jane Elliott Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed study. Hands down, every day, all day long, winning from beyond the three-point arc. Anyway, she's a fabulously amazing, wonderful, and talented and educated and important human being. More importantly, the information and the way that she gets it out there is very important. So we're going to look at that. So I'm going to put up an announcements. I would like you to be here. As the semester winds down, rather than less people showing their face, it's just been going downhill. Like in class, if you actually show up to class, it's just, there you go. That's you. People see you. So I'm not going to be too snarky about it, but I would like more participation in that. You know, if you're here listening, like, you know, show yourself. Otherwise, you're probably gaming or logged on to do something else. I know how it works. Julie's supposed to go to Vitamin Cottage meetings at 8:30 at night. Hell no. She logs on. I tell her to make one comment, and then that's it. Zion shuts it down for her. I know how this goes. If you are actually here and engaged in this stuff and it's important material to you, show yourselves. Anyway, and that's just sort of a heads up for the rest of the semester so that we don't lose this vibe, this thing that we're already losing, right? We're already getting chapped because of not being able to be together in a classroom with me playing music ahead of time and people talking and all the things that people do. Now, it doesn't seem to me, over looking at pictures on social media over the weekend, that people are having any trouble going out and hanging all over each other without masks. So anyway, so during class, just, you know, if you can participate or be seen, that's fantastic. It's only because I think it just adds this human element to it. Now, what questions do you have, if any? A discussion will start this Thursday. I might, like I said, switch around the Jane Elliott one. It makes sense to me rather than the war on drugs because of what we're doing immediately. Like right now, we're doing that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to switch around the dates, Shelby and everybody else. I'm officially going to do that. You don't have to watch it on your own, though. We will do that Wednesday in class. Then next Thursday, I think the exam opens up. Said maybe it was the 8th, next Thursday or Friday. It should be open like before from that, I don't know, the Thursday or whatever date I have on there till the Saturday at noon. Same rules apply. I think this one, though, we're going to stick with this race chapter and we'll just be doing chapters 7 and 9. So we can be really, really focused on what I think is some of the most important stuff that we're learning all semester long. And really in the course of your life, top stuff here. Very, very important. So no questions from anybody? You're all just cruising along? Okay. So this is the time to do the Food Matters. This is the time to do the Food Matters paper. I know. But before, if I don't mention it all the time in semesters in the past, then people at the end of the semester are like, well, Jesus Christ, it was such a huge paper and Jason didn't talk about it. No, I'm not. No, that's not. It's probably meant in a really loving way. Jesus Christ, Jason didn't even. No. So I've been preparing you for it. I've talked about it. I've asked questions about it. I'm probably pissing you off by now, but whatever. I just want to make sure that you feel prepared about this big thing that is very manageable. But if you try and do this paper the night before, no, son. So just to clarify, there is a different discussion due Thursday than the war on drugs. Yes, I will make an announcement about it. I will put it up in blinking internet neon lights. And you have to make your first post by this Thursday. But I'm going to switch that in the blue-eyed, brown-eyed around because I can. And it doesn't make any sense to wait a month to talk about what we just talked about. So that I could not foresee at the beginning of the semester, but it seems easy to me to take care of. All right. If there's no other questions, also, is it at the end of this week that the papers due, the content assignment? Is that this week or next week? Let me look. I'm here. Weekend live. Oh, April 5th. Okay. So sort of in between. But you know, you'll have what you need to answer and start working on chapter 7 stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything? Anything? No? Okay. Fantastic. I opened up the questions in Top Hat. So if you have not gotten around to answering those, head over and do that. And let me pull up the PowerPoint maybe from where we were before. So I kind of scroll through here if there's not really any questions. And I think this is a good place to start. All right, so what does your ethnicity mean to you? We talked about this last time. And we even got into the territory where some people were like, oh, it's not allowed to mean anything to me. And I was like, hey, let's reel that victim stuff, kick it out the door, and just, you know, look at all sorts. Everyone here has some piece to their ethnicity that they can look at, even if it doesn't or hasn't meant anything to you. It could certainly, no matter what that ethnicity is, that cultural background, that heritage, those practices, the things that your family does and that you've been doing, important across the board. Of course, even for dominant culture folks, for sure. We processed a little bit the sort of return to Jim Crow, Georgia voting piece last Friday. Since then, you've probably seen a lot about it or not. If you're a person that keeps up with the news or blogs or processing this kind of thing, I mean, they were asking people that were involved in writing the legislation and other people in the same party about it. And lots of them didn't want to say anything or didn't understand why that was in there. It's going to cause a tremendous amount of backlash. And so we briefly at least discussed that too. So as we get to ethnicity, what's an ethnic group? Let's kind of look at this. People who are generally recognized by themselves or others as a distinct group. We know that we've talked about that before. Based entirely, though, on social or cultural characteristics, right? A social characteristic that passes from generation to generation. And I was thinking, I mentioned my Irish background and maybe what we did, but then I forgot all about Julie, my Norwegian partner, who once demanded that we eat lutefisk and lefse. Now, are there any folks of Norwegian heritage or descent here that know what lutefisk or lefse is? Good, I see some hands. Go ahead and unmute your mic. Lutefisk, lefse is like a bread, like a tortilla. That's easy. But really, if you've never experienced lutefisk, it scarred me for life. I'm just gonna say it. What is it? Can anybody describe it? Yeah, did anybody describe it? It's hot jelloed fish. Yeah, it's as bad as it sounds. Imagine Jello hot and then made of fish. Woo! But it was what Julie's family did forever and ever. I remember the first time she said, we gotta have this, we gotta have this. And I knew about lutefisk. I tried, like, I went to Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. That whole, everybody's got a little Nessa in their window, a little gnome, and it's very, very, very Norwegian. The king and queen of Norway visited while I was going to school there even. But I did not like it. But that was like the thing, right? That Julie's family passed on from generation to generation. She didn't like lutefisk either. We never did it since. We still do lefse, but it's really important to her on the holidays. Could be all sorts of things, right? So a shared cultural heritage. People define themselves as members of an ethnic category that have a distinct identity. So where does that ethnic distinct identity, that cultural or social characteristic come from? It comes from common ancestors, right? It comes from language, which I don't know how many times this semester I've said is the key to all culture. It comes from religion, right? Religious practices, spiritual practices. And so like race, it is socially constructed. Although we did acknowledge, the presence of some biological components, though not counting for much in as far as like, we looked at the Total Genome Project and what that means as far as our differences. We are, mostly very, very, very similar. All right, so shared cultural heritage, socially constructed. Once I get these definitions, it's just like the other stuff. I really like to make lists, and I'm not going to say bulleted lists because we've got plenty of violent language in this culture already. We'll just say that little black dot there is part of this list. Shared cultural heritage. Ethnicity is socially constructed. For most people, ethnicity is more complex than race. And I will say that I believe that the answers that we got, what does your ethnicity mean to you? There was some really complex, awesome, meaningful, deep human answers there. So, and of course, when we look at ethnicity, we can also say, just like we're a multicultural society, in a way, it's very much the same. We are a multi-ethnic society. All right. Now, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to back it up, right? So race is, or back up from it. Race is constructed from biological, and ethnicity is constructed from cultural traits. This is misstated here. Race, I'm trying to get you to know the difference. Both are socially constructed, okay? Race has a tiny bit of biological elements or traits to it. So, but when we're talking about ethnicity, we are talking about entirely constructed from cultural traits. So, still though, even though there are biological components, from a biological point of view, knowing people's racial category allows us to predict nothing about them. I've said that before. In a way, race means both nothing and a whole lot at the same time. So, because of the tremendous levels of inequality in our society based on race or ethnicity, we have to ask ourselves some important questions. So here are questions, whether you write them down or not. I think that these are just important considerations all semester long, right? Like I lead off most of our chapters like this. So why do we place such an important emphasis on race? We could just ask these right now, but to get you thinking, to get us thinking. All right. So why does race matter so much? Whose interests are served because of this emphasis? So if there is an emphasis on race, if we have placed a value on it, and of course we very much have, whose interests are served? Like I said before, colonialism or anything else really that we look at, gender constructs, you name it, they don't exist within a vacuum. They exist within a historical framework, cultural, cognitive time frame and things like that. So how does a society, or how is a society benefited by or harmed by this framework of race? How can we create a more just or equal society? So, rather than, I think that the victimhood thing is like, how can I speak perfectly about race so that I don't get fired? That's not the question. That is not the question. You won't have to worry about it, right? If we're asking the question, how do we create, or how can we create a more just or more equal society, right? The end goal of all of this isn't to whip people in dominant culture into depression and guilt, or elevate those folks in minority status far above dominant culture folks so that those folks could or even would want to enact some kind of revenge. That's That's silly, although I do think that is a concern of dominant culture. You know, when people start to think about, well, what does affirmative action mean? What do reparations mean? Or what even happens if the tables start to turn a little bit? And I think that's a valid thought. If you've been oppressing people knowingly for hundreds and hundreds of years, it might be a concern to those folks what happens when the tables turn. Because, of course, over time, as people marry, as people have children, and as time moves forward, we are becoming much more diverse. That's an inevitability. So how can we create a more just or equal society? And I asked that question today, and there's some really interesting answers. How can we change our views of race or ethnicity to reflect a more accepting paradigm? Like, a lot of what my students want to know is, I've got a friend or a relative or grandpa or a mom or a dad that's clearly racist. How do I speak to them in a way that might lessen that might get them to be more accepting of a diverse paradigm or perspective? And I will talk about that quite a bit at the end of this lecture, where I really bring in stuff that is all from my outside work that I've been doing with, you know, deprogramming racism and things like that in my work at Interrace, going into police departments and school districts, you name it, working on getting people to be more accepting of paradigms, creating more equal justice, and letting, you know, go of those barriers that have to do with our historical sort of race piece. So what would you ask? So I guess WWA, we know there's WWJDD. What would Jason Downing do? That's right. And so what would you ask to understand the past or the present and the future of race or ethnic relations? I.e., maybe what would we do to do something about this, or what could we do solution thinking about this? So let me look at this real quick and head over here to Top Hat. All right, so what is one solution for creating more racial equality in the United States? Now, I think this is important because we could talk all day long about gender bias, gender bias, gender bias, gender bias. We're not asking what are the solutions. Why are we even having that conversation? We could talk all day about guns, 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 pew, 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 pew. And really, if we're not into the territory of solutions, then why are we having the discussion in the first place? Just to talk about how we can't do anything about things? Same is true with this chapter on race and ethnicity. I want us to have concrete ideas of solutions that we can implement on our campus with your group of friends, in your community, in your state, and in the bigger picture to create more social equality and justice, right? All right, so education. I know it's a broad, I'm just asking broadly, like what is one solution? Education, we'll look at that. Fix racial segregation, good. We will find out when I start lecturing on this that intergroup contact is one of the most important things that we can do. And so ending segregated situations is very important for people to be able to not just understand diversity, but participate more in it. Fixing how divided we are politically. Absolutely. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I will say that racism and race and equality, those aren't issues for one political party or another. The thought of that is ludicrous at best and not the rapper. Let me see, more education on race so everyone has more understanding. Okay, I know what I do for kindergartners. I go in and I talk about trees and I talk about climate change. And kindergartners know about trees and climate change and greenhouse gases. They do. So are we working in earnest in the Poudre School District, in other school districts, to talk fairly, openly, and equitably about race to kids? It matters, especially when we know that children who are very young are internalizing messages about race all the time in their culture, right? Like even something really, really big, like seeing enough racialized images of Jesus, who looks like he comes from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, not Bethlehem in the Middle East, tells people on a deep and disturbing level that people who are of European descent look like and are therefore closer to like a God figure. So whether we're talking about these really big concepts or just seeing advertising, who's important, who's not, who's represented in cartoons or on Sesame Street or whatever that might be in popular culture as well. So yeah, we need robust race education. Yeah, absolutely. More funding for low-income area schools. Yeah, absolutely. Uplifting everybody with education is a big, important part of that. Integrating minority model culture, excuse me, more minority culture and practices into society and the media. Not difficult. We were doing this in the 70s on TV and in popular culture and in the 80s, and then it starts to dip away as if culture wants to pretend, again, we're post-racial, which we know we're not. The way we raise our kids, it definitely, messages about race start at home. Very, very important. Reforming prison and police. Yes. And because I used to do diversity consulting for, not just in, but for police departments, I will say this. There's oftentimes a lot of pushback from people who are police about this thing, about racial justice. And I would say this, I love and embrace any police department, any criminal justice organization or department that thinks that they can do better and that wants to do better. We can do better across all sorts of realms, but we know in regards to race and policing, our criminal justice system needs serious reform on a personal level, on a local level, right? So yeah, it's a big deal to get CRJ in this, to get our institutions in this. And because we know those inequalities are so robust, especially within our criminal justice system, we need to find ways to get better at policing. And I think it's silly to think that we couldn't. That doesn't seem realistic to me. Educate people. I still think ignoring color is not a good solution. It's not. We need to give voices to those who have not been heard and not just pretend nothing happened. Absolutely. That's why, I'm very quick to put a woe back on things like revisionist history in that, suddenly the South, it was about states' rights, things like that, which I've mentioned it wasn't, clearly was about slavery, but absolutely. Giving more opportunities to minorities, not having elections. Reparations, good. Wealth equality. Wealth equality is going to be one of the big gaps that we see, right? 8-1 European African American, 12-1 Europeans to Latina or Latino Americans. So what do we do about that? It's increasing, and it's at unacceptable levels for anyone in this class. No one here in this class thinks that an 8-1 wealth gap, for starters, is legit. Less segregation, changing the media to stop showing minorities in a negative light, working with members and communities to solve problems in their communities. I love that. Yes. Oh God, that's a loaded question. I think a simple answer is we need to undo our beliefs and hatred from the past that people hold on to for some reason and treat everyone fairly. Honestly, I don't know. That is an acceptable answer. Holding people in your life accountable. Also be careful what info you gather from the media. Yeah, absolutely. I just told that to my dad the other day. Teaching disadvantaged people to be more resilient, which we are already, and undeterred. It's not things themselves that upset us, our interpretation of the things that do. Absolutely. Where does your personal power lie and how can you cultivate more of that? Getting the government to listen to the problems. Yep. Raising media awareness for inequalities. Absolutely. Dispelling myths and stereotypes about minority groups. Yes. See, this is a fantastic list. Understanding one another. Our generation is really good at this. Teaching and educating people on the history of racism. Yes. Better social laws, affirmative action, equity in jobs, breaking down systemic racism. Yes. Educate everyone in our history and why it is unacceptable to treat people. Yes. Better education. Literally don't have one. We're doomed. Too many people arrogant, defensive, and blind to our world's problems. True. It seems hopeless at times, but it's not. I don't believe it is anyway. Decriminalization of drugs. Okay. That is one of the reasons that we're watching that American drug war piece, though I might change the due date on it. That's one of our really, really, really big areas of inequalities. And of course, if you're talking about that, then that's related to criminal justice system. And if you're talking about, the inequalities that exist in that, we already talked about that this semester. But once the criminal justice system and you're in jail for a long, long, long time, you are effectively out of this equation. So that's why it's a really big point of entry, right? Not over policing, socialized medicine, more education, portraying all races equally in the media, celebrating diversity, yes. Recognizing unconscious bias exists, yes. Teaching equality to young age, yes. Federal legislation, yes. Raising awareness, yes. Change old rules and systems, disciplining people who don't follow these new rules. And then I would add mine would be crush white supremacy. and, not in a violent way, but just render those organizations, groups, and people voiceless. Because really, yeah, there's nothing really to follow that up with. All right, I love these solutions. I think that they are varied. I think that they address many of the things in our society, and what we're struggling with right now in regards to this. So I guess I would say, with such an amazing list, why don't we see more of these things happening? I don't know if I'm really putting that out there to answer necessarily, but any of these things on this list you really like? Why do you think that it seems so long? Why are we still dealing with some of these? I don't know. I have kind of a broad thing here. Any reaction or response to any of these thoughts so far? I'm gonna take a drink of water. I've been talking for 26 minutes straight.
Feels a bit too hopeful for me.
Sure. Well, just turn on the news. I'll squash that hopefulness down real quick. not trying to be snarky, but in a way, right? That can be toxic too. Anybody else? Just feels too hopeful. Feels like we're not ready, or I don't know, maybe not for that reason, but just how would we pull this off right now? Who else? Thoughts about this? Changing things, our ability to do so.
Yeah, I think that there are too many people that rely too much on the Constitution in a sense. Like, I think like as technology changes and time changes, I'm a firm believer that the Constitution needs to change and amendments need to be made and stuff like that. And I think those types of people are the types of people that won't like accept like radical change like that because of freedom and stuff like that. And they're like, well, what about my equality, you know? So I think that's why it's like a little bit, it feels hopeless at times because people are so stubborn and stuck in their ways. But at the same time, if somehow we're able to get the government to make serious actions, I feel like they'll have to follow suit, and then maybe eventually like they'll evolve, you know, their thought process. But until
Absolutely.
it takes a step, I don't know if anything would happen, you know, like on a national level.
Sure. And the Constitution is a living document. It's written a long time ago. We have to be able to adapt. That's that whole piece, right? Almost one of the first things we've taught, I've said it a lot of times, not a million times, but culture is not stagnant, right? We are continuously changing. So is that good? Who else? Thoughts about this? Solutions, integrating solutions, changing trajectory and inertia in regards to what race?
I would say that, like, since our government is generally run by people who are older, they might just not have the same kind of outlook on life as we do. And so maybe just, I don't know, this is going to sound dumb, but like petitioning for something, since we have that right, and just like making them aware of what the people in their country actually think.
There was a time when the only way you could get elected was to actually listen to your voters and to do what they told you to do. You do know that that's what representation is. Like, you're just there representing all of these folks here. So it seems weird that you would try not to represent people or represent less and less people. Absolutely good awareness. And, I was thinking about this morning, and it's awful for me to be ageist. But everybody is prejudiced in different ways. I'm not a big fan of old drivers. I'm not. And my dad, who's 80, is like, when I'm old, don't let me drive anymore. I hate those old drivers. I'm like, Dad, you're 80. And then I don't know. I'm not going to tell him, Dad, you're 80. But yeah, I don't know. I was sitting there this morning thinking, who does a 74 or 78-year-old president really represent? I don't know. And I'm not trying to attack. This is an honest question. I ask these questions. You think I'm super liberal? Not one, not the other. I am so many different things. It's ridiculous. I'm like conservative about my money, liberal with my mayonnaise and my ranch dressing. But I was thinking about that this morning. Like, all of the people that are really involved in politics and working really hard and have put years and years in this, 40s and 50s and 30s. But at a certain point, right? I don't know. Yeah. So you do bring up a good point, which could be age. I don't know, which is, again, we want to be open and we don't want to be ageist, but when are you working hard to represent? Who are you representing? How many of those people? What are the, I don't know, what do those demographics look like, right? Let me see. Elder, yes, tell us. Sorry to go off about elderly drivers. I'm an elderly driver now. I'm compared to you all. And I learned how to drive in Chicago, so I'm pretty dangerous, really. All right. What else? Anything else about this? Moving forward. All right, cool. Could the fact that things are very one-sided be, oh yeah, I saw that before. Sorry about that. Be part of it. Not everyone has the same opinion. There can be differing opinions. I mean, there can be differing opinions. There are differing opinions. The difference is people used to shut up and listen when I was a kid and then let somebody talk instead of shouting their opinions at people while neither group of people was listening. Yeah, I don't know. We are getting very, very polarized, much, much more than when I was a kid, and politically and in our communities and you name it. Sure. And then back here, a little confused. Oh, it's a direct message. Maybe you could, being a certain descent like African, a racial or ethnic trait. Well, culturally, African heritage, completely ethnicity based. Those recognizable traits that people within that group or others might find distinct, the tiny bit of biological traits that are going on there. Sort of both. All right, good. Well, I'm going to move on here, but an awesome thought. And I think the ways to think about this are we're going to have to think hard about this, how to deprogram racism, how to get more equality. Anyway, let me head back to the PowerPoint and we're going to look at some paradigms here and some sociological paradigms so that we can. All right, just looked at those. This is a bit of where the minority majority already exist. This map, oh, it's at least 10 years old now. But you know, where our percentage of total population consisting of African Americans, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native Americans, as we look at the diversity makeup of Illinois, Illinois, the diversity makeup of the United States. I was actually just looking at Iowa thinking, yep, it is not a very particularly diverse place anyway. I did go to school there for 4 years, so that's why it stands out to me as compared to some of these other ones. So symbolic interactions, let's look at this up close. Minority groups share certain traits and membership in these groups is involuntary, right? And if we're doing minority majority, I've already mentioned before that if we're looking at it from a sociological viewpoint, then we're not just talking about percentages, right? We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about control of resources. So who's dominant? Another way to think about it, minority and majority might be dominant and non-dominant, right? Folks in minority groups have been denied privilege of mobility, right? So the ability or opportunity to own a property or to transmit wealth, these types of things. And regardless, minority folks or groups have this in common. They are treated as member of a group, regardless of individual merits. You know, yeah. So no matter how powerful you may be as an individual, still lumped in that status when we're looking at overall power. All right, so what's a stigma? Attribute that is discrediting to an individual or group because it overshadows other attributes and merits the individual or group may possess. Oftentimes, stigma is applied and then reinforced generationally by dominant culture, okay? So the color of a skin is going to be a stigma, and we're going to spend 200 or 300 years making it that way and reinforcing it, and we're going to decide as dominant culture how much that matters and that that's a negative piece, right? So one of the things that we talked about is deprogramming, or in a very Yoda way, unlearning what you have learned. And we have to do that in regards to things like skin color and color. Like, we are color programmed. Dogs that are black get adopted much less frequency at shelters because of our, yeah, look it up. because of our color constructs, to the point where they already know this. The different like places that are shelters, they have to really advertise those dogs extra. They actually release statistics about why you should love a black dog or a black cat or things like this. So this is the stigma thing, you know, good guy, bad guy, white, black, who's who. That's, you know, a historical framework by which we work in color to it. And of course, we also do that piece, you know, where we integrate color in other ways besides just race of human beings, right? We extend that value. All right, mixed contact, I will talk about that, or intergroup contact, interactions between those who are stigmatized and members of the dominant non-stigmatized group. Intergroup contact, mixed contacts, is one of the best ways that we can deprogram racism. Being around people who are diverse for any amount of time, just, it's really quite remarkable. Really, like, you work with somebody for 8 hours that you never have before, or experience that for a small amount of time, likely you just throw away so much baggage. Up. And many of those things are unconscious. Many of these things, you didn't go into that experience thinking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, my top list of reasons why I'm being prejudiced in the back of my mind unconsciously. No. But mixed contact, intergroup contact, very important as a tool for us, as a strategy for us. So let's talk about the two then, minority and majority groups. So this is, we're outside of the realm, we know this, of just race, right? When we talk about this is good sociological knowledge, certainly going to be on the test. Any category of people distinguished by physical or cultural differences that a society sets apart and subordinates. Okay, so we're talking about minority groups. Sets apart, I've talked about this before, the element of difference, right? And subordinates, okay, so makes less than. Which again, I say this over and over and over again, every culture does that. We talked about that in stratification. Based on race, ethnicity, ability, age, gender, relationship orientation, can be on a lot of different levels here, right? Two important characteristics, right? They share a distinct identity, so visibility, and they experience subordination, disadvantage, okay? Visibility and disadvantage. So minority group, any group that is assigned an inferior status in society, it's just kind of adding on to that definition from outside the text, a group that has less than it's now, and I like this part here. In sociology, I've already told you, I don't think this is possible. For somebody who really wants to create equality, it's probably never going to be exactly equal. Fine, right? But in sociology, we hone in on this by saying less than its proportionate share of wealth. So to be equal doesn't need to be exactly equal, but it can't be ridiculously disproportionate accumulation of wealth 8 to 1, right? I mean, that's a pretty basic example. So disproportionate share of wealth, power, so one thing very tangible, the other thing sort of intangible in ways, and social status, all having very tangible outcomes. Oftentimes, minority group members are discriminated against those, or discriminated against by those in the majority. And I would add unconsciously or consciously. We carry around an awful lot of terms, right? I talk about don't shoot me an email, you know, there's so many violent terms that we have, but we can look back and use words that we use now that you don't know really what the origin of or what it meant or who it's about or what context, right, that's in. So a lot of times it's unconscious, and a lot of times it is very conscious. All right, I love this. Let me see if I can get that look in my face. All right. I'll have something from the grill, Jill. Grill food makes me ill, Jill. No, I think is that Muppets Take Manhattan? All right, let's look at the question that I asked the class, which is, the media most often portrays minorities positively 2 people, negatively 18, 40 as less important than dominant group members, 5 as more important than dominant group members. So the outskirts of that, positively, only a couple, more important, 5, only a handful, but twice that as less important how does the media portray minority group members as less important? Because it's not just something simple like negatively. I think the answer less important than dominant group members is pretty specific and got twice plus the amount of answers. How is this accomplished, or how does this happen in the media?
From what I've seen, there's just less stories about like people of minority groups, like, and if they're like, oh, this person did this bad thing, and it's very negative, and the fact that there aren't many stories makes them less important.
Okay,
I guess.
So less coverage, less stories, number of, absolutely good. What else?
I guess for me, like being Asian American, and my best friend is Arab American. Her mother's from Kuwait. And then we actually had a very long conversation about this because she had sociology last semester, different university though. And we were talking about media representation and how angry her mother gets whenever there's generically Arab or Middle Eastern people on TV. They tend, whenever they're supposed to be speaking Arabic or any sort of Middle Eastern language, she always gets very mad about how badly it is done.
Right.
And I get that too with like whenever there's like generically Asian characters, they're always speaking generally like Chinese, even though there's like hundreds of Asian American languages or Asian languages. Sorry.
And I've good, thank you. And I've heard that, and I'm not bilingual, so I wouldn't have picked up on that if I didn't have students telling me that years ago, which I think is very, very, very subtle, right? Good. Anybody else in here? Sort of a response to that or thoughts about that?
I think a lot of times in the media too, minorities are displayed as like sidekicks rather than main characters. Like the Lone Ranger is very racist if you have watched it. So just stuff like that, I feel like they're just not shown as the dominant, or I guess not dominant, but like the main character.
Okay, so more often as secondary characters. Okay, and I find it interesting to me that so much thought has to be put into making your programming diverse, right? Like if you've got to put that much thought into it, that means that it's likely not that diverse. And it's not people just saying, hey, we should be represented. It's that you truly are underrepresenting and have been, right, for generations, and a multitude of views. We could talk about gender bias and stereotypes, and we will, in regards to the media and the standard Homer's, the dad is kind of a dummy, and the wife is totally smart, and even though the husband is completely unattractive and an idiot, she stays with him. And anyway, there's lots of that. We could do the media piece all day with this for sure, but good insight. Anything else before I move on?
I think that like another thing too is I feel like there aren't a lot of like blatant racist news stories. I mean, except for like stories about Arabs and stuff like that. I feel like that's pretty blatantly racist, but the majority of what I see on the TV is like POC person gets help with shelter or like housing or getting food stamps or like something stupid like that, and it makes them all seem helpless in a way, and it's super like undertones of racism, but like it's just, I don't know, it's really gross to me.
Yeah, I think the subtle stuff is very, very, very much there. I pick up on the subtle stuff, not because I'm a member of minority culture, because I've been doing this for a long time. And a lot of times it's just really like, ouch, I might sprain something. What did I just hear? Yeah, absolutely. Some of it very subtle and some of it ridiculously overt. And so, yeah, I would say that, I mean, there's at least two card-carrying, well-known white supremacists that were working in the last administration and directly in the White House. And I think that sends a terrible message. It's a terrible thing. That's not to say that there haven't been administrations who have had those people working there before. They most certainly have in that place. But yeah, some very overt types of pieces, I guess, to go along with what you're saying, very sort of subconscious. All right, good. So now next one, majority group, same or similar beginning, right? Any group that is dominant in society. Any group that enjoys more than a proportionate share of wealth, power, social status in society. Usually a majority group is in a position to dominate or exercise power over another group. When we do the Stanford prison piece or the blue-eyed, brown-eyed study, we just follow through, and I put in parentheses there. Usually they're in that position, and usually people in power do. And not always, of course. So majority, minority, oftentimes determined by race, but can be sex, physical disability, ability, love, relationship, orientation. Obviously, minority, majority can be across many different realms, social realms, that we look at in sociology of this culture, of every culture of society of that. The sociological usage here, again, I'm just reinforcing this. I think this is a big piece, differs from normal, right? Common numerical usage. I mean, women make up over 50% of the population, though not a lot over. Statistically, you could say that's a majority, but in very few ways, with people who identify with the gender, be able to connect ways in which they have dominant levels of disproportionate levels of access and things like that, which largely they do not. So group's role and status, not its numbers. That sounds like a test question to me. A group's role and status, not its numbers, make it a minority majority group. True or false? Right? True. Okay. So majority equals dominant when we talk about this. Minority equals subordinate or disadvantaged. We use these terms oftentimes interchangeably. Do you consider yourself to be a minority or majority member of the society? So we're going to stop sharing here. Head back to the questions. Do you consider yourself a majority member of society? 21 people said minority, 43 people said majority. Keep in mind, these are not like, that does not reflect our percentages of minority majority on campus. This is like, right? Like 50% or whatever. That's not the case, but these are of respondents. So people in our class who are answering these questions, okay? Let's see. Do you have unearned privileges that make your life easier? All right. We're going to be getting into racism and discrimination next time. Let's look at that follow-up to that. Yes, 62% said yes. 62, excuse me, not percent. 62 people said yes. 4 people said no. And let's identify some of these unearned privileges. I haven't looked at the list yet. I think some of these things could be very subtle. And some of them maybe are just more overt. So unearned privileges that make your life easy. 4 people said being white. 2 people said family money. Being white, not having to worry about what may happen involving police interaction. Skin color, fact that I speak English. So we're, again, identifying unearned privileges that make life easier. I'm a dude life. Work opportunity, not being afraid of the police. Yeah, if you're not afraid of the police, I'm afraid of the police. Plenty. But if you're not, advantage. My race, social class, being born in a sheltered area because we're kind of detached from the rest of the country. South Dakota, I think it's contributed more of a free thinking type of environment, despite it being heavily partisan. Caucasian blonde woman, and that has advantages just by itself. My parents help pay for things, including school. Great. But unearned privilege, right? Good. Being born in the United States. Now that I'm a senior instructor, now I've attained the rank of senior instructor, which makes me sound old. The next level is like master instructor, which makes you sound like a Jedi. Anyway, all right, we'll go back. It's such an advantage to be able to have help paying for things, because I was just put on a committee that looks at scholarships and decides a handful of scholarships, and wow, it's really intense process, and looking at that, and a lot of people talking about their advantages or disadvantages, what that looks like or what help they need. So anyway, being born in America, having citizenship, being born into a middle-class family, privilege tied to my race, financial standing, being a male, getting away with a speeding ticket, straight and white, don't have to worry about violence directed towards me for my race or sexual identity. Parents pay for college, living in Fort Collins, living in the United States. There we go. My parents have good jobs, skin color, that I'm Caucasian, I'm white. Middle class, none. My parents have good jobs and happy, which seems to make my life much easier. My parents pay for my college as long as I get decent grades or something like that. White privilege. Where my parents choose to raise me. Yep. Wow. Where my parents choose to raise me. Yeah, I'm raising my kids consciously in Colorado so as not to have them in the Illinois educational system by any stretch, because there are so many advantages here. That was a conscious decision years before I even thought about having kids. Parents that can support me, not being afraid of my life while interacting with a police officer. Okay, good. So we will wrap it up there, folks. Please look for the announcement that I'll make after class. I'm going to switch the dates, put the Jane Elliott discussion due for Thursday. That being said, on Wednesday, we will watch it in class and discuss it so that you're still a week in advance of the due date and can make your posts. So yeah, if you want to watch it a couple times, I love it. I've seen it like 50 times or more. I don't even know, maybe more than that. Likely more than that. I've worked with Jane Elliott. She's an amazing human being. So you could wait till class till we do that. So tell folks, put it on your calendar, show up in class. I will see you on Wednesday. Be good people, do good things. For reals, we are not out of the woods yet or whatever. So mask up and continue to stay safe, because if we can be patient, it's going to rain hypodermic needles here in the next couple of weeks in Colorado. You'll be vaccinated. Lots of people will be vaccinated. Still, keep your behavior, your sociological behavior, keep that behavior in check with love and compassion. All right. Talk to you later, everybody. Be good people. Do good things.